I'm honored to be asked to hang out with you guys for a little bit. So this is just a quick kind of an overview of things that caught my attention at the show across engineering and policy and whatnot. Happy to take any questions at the end. My whole thinking on something like this, though, is to basically point you to things I found were interesting and hope that it would catch your attention. So, NAB is a global show, but as we convened, it was hard to ignore the big policy questions facing Washington and U.S. broadcasters who find themselves grappling with some big questions these days, and right down to whether the Federal Communications Commission is independent or whether a president can remove commissioners at will, whether the FCC chairman there on the right side can tell broadcasters they're not allowed to institute diversity and inclusion initiatives, whether the administration can really turn off funding to public media, TV and radio stations in the United States. And among the many pretty shocking things the administration has done so far is the attempt to close down or dramatically scale back Voice of America and the other U.S. international broadcasting entities like Radio Free Europe and Radio Marti. Donald Trump thinks they're bastions of leftist propaganda. Others can't believe that he would willingly shut down or silence such an historically important voice for our country on the international scene. These are all being played out in court, but there certainly seems to be no fight from Republicans in Congress to challenge him on this, though I can only imagine what somebody like Ronald Reagan or Dwight Eisenhower would have said given their international roles. Not to dwell too much on U.S. politics, but the situation in Washington is more uncertain than I can remember, at least since the 1970s. The FCC chairman himself did not choose to come to the show. Neither of the Republican commissioners came, so it was left to a Democrat, Anna Gomez. She paid her own way to come, and she was critical of what's happening at the commission. She said the FCC does not have authority to police diversity and inclusion. It should not shut down Voice of America. As she says, she wants to see the commission pivot away from culture wars and focus on its core mission. If there is one policy change, though, that I feel comfortable predicting, it's that this commission is likely to remove media ownership rules that are constraining further consolidation in the United States. It's just my prediction, but the NAB is very vocal about it, and I do expect this will be the commission that does away with the subcaps on how many radio stations one company can own in a market. So if you're a fan of consolidation, if you think it's going to cause stations to invest more in content and people, you should be happy with that. Lots of people question that premise. You could not walk the floor without hearing a conversation about tariffs, of course. And I personally can't keep track of where this administration is at any given time on this. That's probably intentional on their part, but many exhibitors clearly were concerned about the possible impact from higher costs for those of us who buy equipment, as well as the impact on budgets and CapEx planning. What happens when steel, like computers, printed circuit boards, and other key components cost more? How do you deal with the uncertainty when the tariff is put into place and then taken back? We've heard a lot of different opinions, but I don't hear too many voices speaking up, generally speaking, in favor of tariffs, not in our business anyway. We ran an informal survey last week of our readers, and 45% told us their budgets either have been scaled back or frozen because of the tariff situation. And the show came at a challenging time for many people in American radio. The big radio companies hold these quarterly investor calls, and they were always talking about, hey, it's how great we're streamlining, we're reducing our debt. But it sure is discouraging year after year to read about the latest cuts in headcount at iHeart and Cumulus and Odyssey. All of these are companies that already went through Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the past 8 years. And it's not unique to commercial radio. Public radio has been hit too. And, not to be a downer, but it's important to understand the financial backdrop of the industry right now. One of the big questions, of course, after the pandemic was the effect on in-person trade shows. The short answer is generally that people like in-person trade shows. But this NAB saw a decline from last year. It's been a couple of years running now that the attendance has gone down. 55,000 was the number this year. It's still a substantial show, but the trend line clearly, if you compare it, especially to pre-COVID, is there on the chart in that the trend chart that I put together. If you compare to shows like the IBC and the CES, which recently have actually been seeing increases. The Las Vegas Convention Center has moved into the next phase of its renovations. This show is the first and largest that will take place during the months that the Central Hall is closed. By next year, the renovations will be done and the familiar entrance, that central entrance there, will have that big flyover arch that looks like the new West Hall across the street. Exhibit spaces will be brighter and more welcoming. The central hall's front, off to the right there, is being built forward. That's where buses used to pull in. That's where there was a smoking patio, if you'll excuse the expression. So there's going to be a hallway there, a bright new hallway. And this is important because there's a change in the works for radio and TV exhibitors next year, that there's going to be a so-called TV and radio headquarters floor area. And this is going to be located in Central. That bus area that I mentioned, it would be just off to the left of this picture, and the big new Central Hall entrance would be up just to the top. And this is kind of a change from what we've seen in the past few years, when the radio has been spread out more than in years ago. You remember there was a radio floor. Everybody wanted to go to the radio floor. And because of the renovations and because of some changes that NAB has put into place in the last decade or so, that tended to get lost. And
Excuse me?
Yes.
We are not seeing the video. We are seeing only you.
You haven't seen any pictures?
No, except you.
Oh, that's not good.
Oh no, it's
All right.
working on my screen though.
It's
I've got
working on
pictures
mine.
here.
He's presenting, Willie, but you probably need to change your view. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, can you change your view?
Okay,
And
I'll change.
That'll
I'll
be
change.
on the upper right.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
everybody else got that going okay? All right, so yeah, so I'm showing the map here that this is the Convention Center Central Hall, and that's the TV and radio headquarters area. There'll be about 100 companies that are focused there, and others that maybe are not in that actual portion of the grid will still be close by if they serve. That'll be helpful if a company serves both radio and television, as an example. So it'll be interesting. I think it should give a more cohesive feel to events for broadcasters next year. Just before the show opened, the technology company Q released its 2025 in-vehicle visuals report. This is the second year in which the company conducted a study of dashboards in the top 100 best-selling car models in the United States, though the findings should have plenty of relevance throughout North America. A key finding: 74% of the models, 3/4 of the models, are audio forward, which means they have an audio media button and default to the source that was played most recently. By comparison, 26% are radio forward, meaning they open to a radio screen all the time when you start the car, or they have a dedicated radio button. That number is down within 1 year from 36 to 26%. What that means in short is that radio is getting harder to find in cars with modern dashboards and electronic screens. Steve Newberry, the head of Q, says one of the lessons radio has to take away is to stop thinking of itself just as providing key services in drive time, say, and trying to be the last source that was being listened to when the car is turned off. So it's the first one that comes back. This report is very impressive to me. I mentioned this last year in some of my talks, and I just reiterate that Q has done a real service to the industry. If nothing else, if you go into that report online and you dig down, and you can find pictures of what radio looks like, its metadata looks like, in 100 different models this year and last year. Now you can start to compare, and you can see, for instance, in this Honda CRV, that radio's metadata and album art shows up right in front of the driver. This is what the driver looks at when they're looking down to see how fast they're going, and there's the metadata. We're seeing that in more and more cars. So you learn a lot just by digging into all the pictures that they run. A story that has to do with both policy and technology is that the National Association of Broadcasters wants the U.S. government to allow broadcasters to use software encoding and decoding for the emergency alert system, software-based instead of hardware. NAB's been pushing this issue for 2 years. They even took FCC staff on a tour of a radio station about it last fall. But the request takes on more urgency now because one of 2 remaining EAS device manufacturers, Sage, recently announced it would cease production of its hardware. It will continue to support legacy devices in the field, but it will no longer make new hardware. There's only one remaining company making hardware, Digital Alert Systems, and they're asking the FCC not to rush into this decision and consider it carefully. They think that the NAB proposal has problems, including some cybersecurity concerns. So we'll see where this goes. There's been a lot of filings with the FCC about it. The Broadcast Engineering and IT Conference was a big one, 70 presentations on a range of topics, including next-gen television and new applications for artificial intelligence. It kicked off with a twist. They brought attendees the opportunity to chat with NASA astronauts aboard the International Space Station. This had a news hook too, because NASA was showcasing live UHD switching and routing capability at its Johnson Space Center in Houston. The conference featured several sessions on interesting aspects of AM radio. The first was by John Keane of Cavell Mertz. He's worked with the National Radio Systems Committee and did a study to measure AM radio channel noise and signal strength over various road environments, rural, suburban, urban. He monitored both the unoccupied channels and active local stations as he was driving along, looking at environmental RF noise from sources like power lines and traffic signals and equipment in buildings nearby. John concluded, a little surprisingly, that AM radio is still capable of delivering very satisfying sound in this environment. He said most noise can be almost eliminated with the built-in software in car radios today. And along roadways, RF noise was moderately low, but he was surprised by the extent to which in built-up areas, especially urban areas, signal reception was weaker. His measurements showed substantial drops in the received signal strength as he approached the city of Baltimore, for instance. And he said these drops are not predicted by standard ground wave maps, and they are big enough to make otherwise strong signals seem weak and noisy. So, if you're in the business of caring about an AM signal and how it's received in various listening environments, you might want to check out this study. It's on the website of the National Radio Systems Committee under reports. Immediately after him was a talk by Bob Weller of the NAB. The engineers there have been studying the possible effects on radio of wireless power transfer systems, not only ones you find in a garage or a parking lot, but also these newfangled ones that charge the car while it's driving over the roadway. These are pictures from a prototype installation in Detroit, where a section of road has been equipped with inductive charging coils that charge your electric vehicle as you drive over it. So the NAB found that these systems do emit signals in the AM band that can cause interference, but it's very variable. How much of it depends on a lot of factors. And they only measured out to about 10 meters. They plan to do more work. But where they did find interference, for a static system, where the charged vehicles are parked, they heard a 5 kilohertz tone, although they noted that given the fact that car radios in North America have fairly narrow audio bandwidth, this 5 kilohertz beat was not as audible as you might expect. Where the cars were driving over this beta system here, essentially, the charge while in motion, the interference they heard was a chirping sound, because what happens is the charging system is tuning its fundamental frequency to optimize the coupling, the coil on the street and the one under the vehicle, and that the distance between them is changing, so they're getting a chirping sound as a result. But a lot of factors have to be in place. This is early work. Basically, they're laying the groundwork to understand better the possible impact of these systems on radio reception. Also in the conference, David Maxon of Isotrope discussed the high-efficiency broadband antenna, the HEBA. This antenna is 73 feet high, and its elements are stacked above an elevated ground plane, which is 40 feet square. The FCC, I'm sorry, there's also no ground radios. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to an antenna like this, and I'm sure that a number of people on this call probably have been following developments in this area over the decades because of the interest that AM stations would have in a small format antenna that doesn't have any ground radios. One of these has been operating for years at WQVR in Massachusetts at 1 kilowatts power. The FCC recently granted the station nighttime approval, but only at 4 watts. Maxon said, don't confuse this with the crossfield antenna. He said the physics of that, in his word, were a fantasy, but he said, while this antenna inherits its physical design from the crossfield antenna, it's a different animal, thanks in part to the engineering work of Kurt Gorman at Phase Tech. And he said the efficiency is competitive with typical AM towers that need full-size ground systems. David Maxon is there on the right in the photo, and he said he gave a peek at additional data about this antenna that he says shows significant reduction in skywave radiation. So the investors behind this product are welcoming inquiries about possible installations. It's sold in the market by a company called Worldwide Antenna Systems out of Kingston, Massachusetts. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that. 4 of America's prominent TV broadcast groups described their plans to launch a joint venture that would provide reliable data delivery via NextGen TV or ATSC3. This venture is called EdgeBeam. EdgeBeam. The heads of Gray Media, Nexstar, Scripps, and Sinclair said that ATSC3 spectrum can be used to create a national network to transmit data. Where the internet is built for one-to-one streaming of video on high demand, it's not ideal at scale, and that's where broadcasters don't face a limitation. So they believe EdgeBeam will be able to deliver data nationally to any device that has an ATSC3 receiver, car, truck, telephone, a ship, a drone even. Now, right now, ATSC3 is in about 3/4 of the United States. To get a national footprint, the executives are pushing for deregulation of the ownership rules. Meanwhile, the NAB is hoping the FCC will soon approve a sunset for ATSC1 to allow broadcasters more spectrum for services like this. Interesting stuff. Rob Bertrand gave a talk at the Public Radio Engineering Conference that was interesting. He's a bright engineer whose career has included jobs at CBS Radio in New York and WAMU in Washington, and he recently joined Inrush Broadcast Services. He has been advocating a vision where engineers work together outside of radio stations, much more so than is currently the case. He says, hey, there are too few broadcast engineers in the business. Economic conditions have deteriorated to the point where stations can no longer afford meaningful technology staff. So he thinks engineers need to be proactive and think creatively about a new paradigm of how they offer their services. He wants engineers much more to work together outside of broadcast companies, supporting one another, building opportunities for career growth, finding ways to create healthy work-life balance, which certainly can be an issue in the engineering profession, and last but not least, to have good salaries. It's a way of thinking. So he's being a proponent for approaching things differently. Xperi was at the show. They marked the 20th anniversary of HD radio in cars. The first receivers were in BMWs in 2005. And now HD radio is in 60% of vehicles that are shipped in the United States. The company believes that it has shipped, that there have been 115 million vehicles globally with HD radio. Joe D'Angelo at Xperi, who's in the photo here, he made an interesting observation. He said there was an important tipping point about 2018 with a mandate that cars needed to have backup cameras. And even though that wasn't something that you think of right away as a radio issue, he said this was a very important impetus for major manufacturers to commit to larger screens in their dashboards. And with more attention on bigger screens, that turns around that there's more attention on radio metadata and the opportunities to provide rich visual information. As you probably know, Xperi offers the DTS AutoStage connected car platform. That's the one that combines over-the-air linear broadcasting with two-way IP delivered content, the so-called hybrid radio format. And it brings rich metadata and personalization, but it also opens up things like gaming and video. So keep an eye on that at Xperi. Sad news came during the show that Herb Squire had passed away at the age of 80. Herb was a longtime engineer known for his work at radio stations in New York City. He was active with a number of engineering and standards organizations. But many engineers might remember him for his talk at the 1993 NAB Show, where he warned that the combination of 2 or more data compression schemes in a broadcast air chain could significantly degrade the audio quality overall. This was the notion of compression stacking or dueling algorithms, and Radio World reported about it on page 1 at the time. But of course, his career touched in many ways and a lot of people. He assisted, for example, in the development of a master antenna at 4 Times Square after the 2001 terror attacks that destroyed so much of New York's broadcast infrastructure. LPFM's been in the news in the United States after a recent window for construction permits. There'll be a lot of new low-power FM stations coming onto the band. There are close to 2,000 of them already. The Society of Broadcast, from the original windows, I should say, not the new window. The Society of Broadcast Engineers at the NAB Show promoted a publication of a new self-inspection guide for low-power FM stations. These self-inspection guides have been very well received, and SBE and NAB have been working together on them. You may know that they, in the last year or so, they put out guides for FM, AM, and television as well. So you can get these guides at the SBE website, and they are free if you're a member. Excuse me. The Society also released its CERT preview practice exams in a new format. You may well know that CERT preview allows you to take or study up and prepare to take one of the certification exams through sample tests. And originally, these tests were done years ago on paper, and they've been offered in software format for years. But now the SBE has put it into a web-based systems, and you can take these sample tests on nearly any device. These are available for purchase on the Society website. This show was also the first chance for many members to meet the new executive director, Michael Downs. He's there on the left. He started work in January, succeeding Jim Ragsdale, who stepped down after 3.5 years. Mike is shown with SBE President Ted Hand. He has almost 30 years of experience in nonprofit management, including with big organizations like Kiwanis International and Key Club International. He lives in Indiana, where SBE is based, and he's a past president of the Indiana Society of Association Executives. And the Society also elevated 3 people to the rank of fellow. They are Roz Clark, Steve Keeler, and Thomas McNichol. You probably know, but the fellow honor is the highest membership level in the Society. Members must have made significant contributions to broadcast engineering or to the Society, and the members are nominated by their peers and the board approves. There are now 92 people who have been honored with the fellow rank in the SBE's 61 years. The amateur radio operators reception is a traditional part of the show. Unfortunately, it did not take place in 2025. Several companies had supported it over the years, but the NAB had no sponsor this year, and the organization said it would take the opportunity to rethink the event for next year. So let's hope it comes back in some form. It certainly had the best door prizes of any event that I can remember. And now for the rest of my time, I'll just do a quick whip around of some products that we saw, including a sampler of winners from our Best of Show award. Were there any notable trends? Well, it's obvious that companies continue to invest and build out their software offerings, where once so many broadcast functions were done in hardware. Or they're dreaming up hybrid solutions that are easy to implement for people who are not accustomed to working with software, but that are still virtual or based on software. Streaming continues to be very important for broadcasters. The cloud and virtualization, products to manage the metadata that we talked about earlier are flourishing, and there were a lot of audio processing products. So you'll see some of them here. Max Connect released its first product as a result of a collaboration with Audio Science. This is a streaming radio multi-tuner, It allows for up to 16 individual tuners in a single rack space with separate antenna inputs for AM, FM, and NOAA weather, and they're capable of HD radio reception as well. Each tuner has an embedded stream encoder, as well as dedicated analog outputs in Studio Hub format. It can detect silence or loss of carrier, and it can alert you via email or SNMP. It costs about $2,800 to start, and that would get you 4 tuners that are capable of AM, FM, or NOAA weather. As I say, there's a healthy ecosystem of products around streaming, and Innovonics showed a new generation of site streamers for remote signal monitoring, the Site Streamer 2. This is a web-enabled off-air receiver for remote monitoring of FM, AM, HD, and DAB. It retails for $1,200. This is a new version that has an SDR-based tuner, a better LCD display, high-quality streaming for up to 10 listeners, better metering for off-air and auxiliary reception, and more alarm options. You can now monitor both off-air and auxiliary levels at the same time with meters, and you can select from 30 presets to include in the round-robin monitoring mode that the unit offers. Good stuff from Innovonics as always. American Amplifier Technologies was at the show, and they have a mobile app called Empower. Empower. It is intended to empower broadcasters to monitor and manage equipment. Right now, this is an app for use with the company's own products, like its RF power meters and its voltage monitoring systems. But American Amplifier is also working on a controller device that would allow SNMP devices from other manufacturers to talk to the app. It tracks parameters from your phone like power levels and voltage and alarm status. It has customizable alerts, and it will send notifications when a parameter deviates from whatever threshold that you set in it. So keep an eye on American Amplifier. They've been doing some good work. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about the cloud lately because I'm putting finishing touches on an ebook that will update our readers about cloud-based tools for radio. And a perfect example is offered by RCS. The parent company of RCS is iHeartMedia, and it has been transitioning hundreds of its stations to this platform. The message from RCS at the show is that for automation, the cloud offers incredible flexibility and incredible remote operation capabilities, and it's not just for backup. It's perfectly reliable to serve as a main on-air system. In fact, Philippe Generali, who's there in the picture with me, told me that, you know, there had been a sense that people might be afraid to approach cloud-based automation as a main on-air system, but he said it actually turned out to be not that traumatic for so many different of the users that they're talking about and that they've been working with. At the end of the day, he said, most of the organizations just want it to be reliable, and if you show them that it's reliable, the end users certainly don't care, and the engineers trust it. Similarly, on the cloud topic, Radio.Cloud took home a Best of Show award for its content controller. This will be a tool useful for syndicators who want the benefit of a national program but don't want to lose the local flavor. So this platform uses AI, and it uses it to enhance the syndicated program and create and distribute customized shows at scale. It works in a browser, and it does not require hardware. How do you pay for it? You start with a platform fee of about $500 per month, which has the ability to build a show and store your content. And then you'd add $35 to $75 per month per affiliate, depending on the frequency of the show. The cost is to the syndicator or content creator, not to the station that gets the show. It was a good show for Radio.Cloud. They've been taking a higher profile, and in fact, they were successful at having Amazon Web Services partner with them. Amazon showed Radio.Cloud in its own busy booth. Still in the cloud theme, this is a product from Utel. Sports broadcasting, of course, is evolving faster than ever, and this company in Finland already makes automation that lives in the cloud called Radio Man, and this is an extension of that. It's called Lampu. It's a companion to the automation system available for Android and Apple. It works within the Radio Man platform, and it helps broadcasters produce content from anywhere using a laptop, headsets, and a mobile phone. For one example, teams that are looking to launch a sports station online could use Radio Man in the cloud as the core infrastructure, and then they could use Lampu to enhance their remote production. Now, I mentioned some of the other products that are out there. Here's a nifty one from Telos that you can hold in your hand, the VX Duo. This is a broadcast voice over IP system in the form of a mini PC. It comes with two hybrids that can be used either for a single studio with two separate caller faders on your board, or you can split it between two studios, such as in an AM/FM combo or a control room that has a production studio attached. The software includes 3-band adaptive digital dynamic EQ. It has a 3-band adaptive spectral processor. It has features like noise gating, automatic gain control, wideband acoustic echo canceller, and it costs around $2,000. It is expandable by adding a license fee up to 8 channels. Telos actually is planning an entire line of what they call studio essentials, or SE, that are easy to buy and easy to use and repurpose. So we started to see that at this convention. Jeff's company, Nautel, of course, was at the show. It partnered with Q, the company I told you about earlier, to create an easier and more affordable way to implement visual radio for the dashboard, called the Visual Radio Airchain. This expands on Nautel's software-based approach for HD radio, which they've been talking about for a couple of years now at the convention. By integrating Q and rapid functionality into the transmitter, the two companies hosted a real-time demo at the Nautel booth, and they showed implementation of station logos and album art and advertiser graphics and whatnot. It always was busy every time I came by. Also busy was the Orban booth. The Optimod FM audio processor turns 50 this year. Hard to believe. Bob Orban released the first one in 1975, and he was there to celebrate the anniversary this year. He and the company brought along a couple of racks of legacy gear, and that included a 50-year-old Orban 8000 that still works. New this year is the Optimod 5950 HD. This version provides FM and HD1 processing, as well as a second independent audio processing chain called HD2. It comes in a single rack unit, as you can see there, with a high-resolution touch display, and it can be controlled remotely via HTML5 browsing. Now, this processor retails for about $12,000. The street price is around $11,000. It's a powerful box. It has 4 processing structures you can choose from, including 5-band, 2-band, low latency 5-band, and ultra low latency 5-band. While we're on the subject of processing, the new Rule Breaker is an audio clipper created by Hans von Zutphen of Timeo. Hans tells us that clipping has always been a game of give and take. You push a clipper too hard and you get distortion on the air. If you want it loud, you risk it being dirty. But if you want it clean, you lose punch. So his innovation was that he said normally the left minus right in the composite is symmetrical, but he said that if you intentionally use asymmetry, you can push more audio through without clipping. And then you combine that with intelligent analytics to reduce the amount of clipping. All this, he said, leaves you with a boost of 2 to 3 dB and better protection from intermodulation distortion, giving you a punchy, silky sound. This is not something you buy on its own. It comes in other products. And so you can access it, for instance, in the Stereo Toolbox, which is made by Angry Audio, or Timeo's own processor called the ST Extreme. Pardon me. And continuing with that theme of processing, Wheatstone had not one, but 2 audio processors. The Wheatstream Duo is a streaming appliance. It provides processing for your encoded streamed audio. It's compatible with standard content delivery networks and streaming platforms, and it can adapt metadata from most automation systems. This box costs under $2,000. The one under it, the Neuron, is a spectral audio processor for use on the air. And this is an example of Wheatstone's philosophy. They say they think that the market is moving away from high-end boxes that cost $10,000 or $15,000 even for major market stations. This Neuron costs about $4,600, and it's for FM, HD, and DAB applications. The design, it says, allows you to drive more energy into the processor while maintaining peak compliance. And just a couple more to mention. We talked about metadata. The Radio Experience is a platform that's been around for years, delivering visual content dashboards. TRE Plus is a new iteration for managing song titles and artists and all that other good stuff. It's based in the cloud, and it's capable of managing data across all sorts of delivery methods like analog FM, HD radio, RDS, DAB, streaming, and more. That's from Broadcast Electronics, the new version of the Radio Experience, or TRE+. And on the RF side, Progressive Concepts showed a stainless steel FM antenna called the Zyklone. This is a broadband FM antenna, inexpensive. It requires no tuning from 88 to 108. The company says what sets it apart is that frequency response is very flat across the entire band, even near the top and bottom, where other broadband designs usually show at least some roll-off and loss of efficiency. A single bay antenna version costs under $800. There are versions in 2 bays and 4 bays, and we're talking here about power of like 3 kilowatt limit, up to 3 kilowatts for a single or 2 bay model. Progressive Concepts, by the way, is based in Chicago and is celebrating its 35th anniversary, but this was its first time as an NAB exhibitor. And I would not want to end without mentioning Paul Schulens, who was honored with the NAB Radio Engineering Achievement Award. He has worked as a chief for 45 years. You may know him from his great years of work as an engineer at Greater Media or an executive with Burke Technology. He's done a lot of important work with drones, getting into that early with broadcast engineering. He's a past president of the IEEE Broadcast Technology Society. He's been active with SBE. He's written in the NAB Engineering Handbook. He's the co-owner of a consulting firm with Jim Stenberg, and he takes amazing astronomy photos, which is why when we featured him on the cover of a recent issue, we showed him with a telescope. And with that, I'll just add a quick commercial for our own publications. If you aren't already receiving them, please do sign up for the free issues of Radio World and our free daily Smart Brief newsletter. Our readers also enjoy the benefits of monthly free ebooks and an annual industry directory. You can just go to radioworld.com and click on the subscribe tab. And with that, I will say thank you very much. Happy to take any questions. I appreciate the privilege of being with you today.